Welcome back to our series on the OEIS. Especially for those of you who are big into number theory, we're doing a deep dive into these integer sequences. And, well, today is no exception. We're tackling OEIS entry A000159. And you won't believe where it takes us. It's proper dinner party etiquette.
It really is amazing how something so simple as seating arrangements can become such a rich mathematical problem.
I know, right? It's called the menage problem. Imagine hosting a dinner party with, like, several couples.
Right.
You want to seat them around a circular table, men and women alternating. But here's the catch. No one can sit next to their partner.
Exactly. And as you start adding more couples, well, the complexity just explodes. That's where our friend A000159 comes in.
Okay, so this sequence, A000159, what does it actually represent in this problem?
It represents the number of possible arrangements for each number of couples that you have.
Okay, so let's say I have 3 couples. How many different ways can I arrange them around the table so that no one is sitting next to their spouse?
Well, for 3 couples, you have 12 possible arrangements. But as you go up to 4 couples, it jumps to 96. And then for 5 couples, it's a huge 3,120.
Wow, those numbers are really going up fast. So to help us kind of visualize this, is there a way we can actually see a solution, like what it would look like?
Absolutely. If you head over to the Wikipedia page for the menage problem, you'll find a helpful diagram there. It shows a circular table with place settings, so you can actually see how those couples would be arranged to meet the criteria.
That's a great tip. Now, I understand there's actually a formula called Tuchard's formula
Right.
that can calculate these numbers directly. It looks a bit intimidating, though, at first glance with all those factorials and summations, but can you break down the basic idea behind it?
Well, you're right. It does look a bit complex at first glance, but essentially Tuchard's formula is using what we call the inclusion-exclusion principle. So it starts by counting all possible arrangements, and then it systematically subtracts the arrangements where at least one couple is seated together, and then it continues to refine that count until you're left with just the valid arrangements.
So it's kind of like overcounting on purpose
Hmm.
and then strategically subtracting the bad arrangements to get to the right answer.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really powerful technique for these kinds of combinatorial problems. And it's pretty remarkable when you think about it. I mean, this problem was solved way back in 1891. But, mathematicians today, they're still discovering new ways to approach it and new connections to other areas of mathematics.
That's what's so cool about these classic problems. They just keep inspiring new discoveries. Now, I also read about something called menage numbers, which form a related sequence, A000179. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Sure. So menage numbers kind of tackle a modified version of the problem. So imagine the women are already seated around the table. The menage numbers tell us how many ways we can then arrange the men so that none of them sit next to their partners.
Oh, interesting. So we're fixing the women in place and then figuring out the men. Does that simplification actually change the complexity of the problem at all?
It does. It actually cuts the complexity in half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By fixing those positions of the women, we're reducing the number of variables that we need to consider.
That's clever. Now, I understand that these menage numbers are linked to something called matchings in graph theory. And I got to admit, graph theory is not really my forte. So did you maybe explain that connection in a way that even I could understand?
Of course. So picture a circle, and let's put some dots around that circle to represent the seats at your dinner table. So that's an example of what we call a cycle graph.
Okay.
A matching in this graph is basically like pairing up those dots, so pairing up those seats, in a way that no dot is connected to more than one other dot.
Okay, I think I can start to see this visually now.
Okay.
So assigning the partners at the table is kind of like creating a matching in that cycle graph.
Yeah, exactly. And the challenge in the menage problem is finding a matching where no one is paired with their actual partner.
Ah, so we're looking for a very specific type of matching. And this leads to another cool concept, crown graphs. What are crown graphs and how do they relate to our dinner party problem?
So imagine now you have 2 rows of dots, one representing the men at your dinner party and the other representing the women. And we're going to draw lines connecting every dot in one row to every dot in the other row. So this is what we call a complete bipartite graph.
Okay.
Now, a crown graph is formed by removing the lines that connect each person to their own partner. So what you're left with kind of resembles a crown shape. And the cycles within this graph actually represent those valid seating arrangements for the menage problem.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So the way we seat our guests is actually like tracing a path through this crown graph. and making sure we never complete a cycle that includes a couple sitting together.
You got it.
And what's really interesting is that I read the menage problem isn't just connected to cycle graphs and crown graphs, but also to something called perfect matchings in bipartite graphs, which ties into the math of permanence of matrices.
Right.
Matrices. That's a surprise.
Yeah.
I never would guess that dinner party seating could be related to matrices.
Yeah, it just shows you how interconnected math really is. These seemingly different concepts often weave together in the most unexpected ways.
This deep dive is full of surprises. So we've got graphs and matrices, but wait, there's more. I read that the menage problem is even connected to knot theory.
Yes, that's right. Back in the 1800s, a mathematician named Peter Guthrie Tate noticed a fascinating link between the seating arrangements and the way a knot can be drawn. So you can think of a knot as like a closed loop with crossings where the loop passes over or under itself.
Yeah.
Tate realized that the different ways you can arrange couples around a table could actually represent the different ways to arrange those crossings in a knot, so different knots.
So the way I seat my dinner guests could actually determine the shape of a knot. This is crazy.
It's pretty amazing. And it wasn't just a theoretical curiosity either. In 1956, another mathematician named Gilbert actually used a modified version of the menage problem solution to actually count the number of different knots with a specific number of crossings. And that led to yet another sequence in the OEIS, sequence A002484.
It's incredible how this dinner party problem has led us down this rabbit hole of mathematical connections, from graphs and matrices to knots and even beyond. And for our listeners who are into number theory, this really highlights just how prevalent combinatorial problems are in math and how tools like the OEIS can help us explore these really cool connections. It really is amazing how the OEIS is like this treasure trove for anyone who's interested in number theory. Now, with all these connections to graphs and matrices and knots, is there actually a visual way to represent Tuchard's formula itself? We've seen how helpful visualizations can be in understanding all these concepts.
That's a really interesting question. While there isn't a commonly known visual representation for Tuchard's formula, that doesn't necessarily mean one doesn't exist or couldn't be created. There might be some kind of hidden visual pattern within that formula just waiting to be discovered.
Maybe one of our listeners will be inspired to take on that challenge. That would be so cool to see the elegance of that math kind of brought to life visually.
I agree. That would be fantastic.
So to recap our journey today, we started with a simple dinner party seating problem and ended up exploring graphs and matrices and knots, and even the possibility of visualizing a complex mathematical formula.
Yeah, and it all stemmed from one little integer sequence, A000159. Who knew dinner parties could be so mathematically rich?
This is why I love doing these deep dives. They're like portals to these hidden mathematical worlds.
I agree. And speaking of exploring, I definitely encourage everyone to check out the OEIS entry for A000159 themselves. You can really get lost in the world of integer sequences.
We'll also include links in the show notes to all the resources we mentioned today. So don't be afraid to dive deeper into any of the concepts that maybe piqued your interest.
Yeah, you know what I find really fascinating about the menage problem is that it shows how even seemingly simple problems can have these deep connections to really complex mathematical ideas.
It's a great reminder that there's always more to learn and explore, no matter how basic a problem may seem at first.
Exactly. And the OEIS is just such a fantastic tool for facilitating that exploration. It reminds us that math isn't just about formulas and equations, but it's about patterns and relationships and a sense of wonder.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Until next time, happy exploring.
And keep those dinner parties mathematically intriguing. It's really quite amazing how a seemingly simple question about seating arrangements can lead us to this whole web of mathematical concepts.
Well, that's the beauty of math, isn't it? These unexpected connections are everywhere, just waiting for us to uncover them.
I know, right? Makes you wonder what other hidden gems are tucked away in those seemingly ordinary integer sequences in the OEIS.
I think that's a great point, a great takeaway for our listeners today. Don't underestimate those simple problems. They just might lead to some really profound insights.
So to wrap up our deep dive today into OEIS entry A000159, let's leave our listeners with a final thought. We talked about visualizing those solutions to the menage problem using graphs, but could there be a way to actually visually represent Tuchard's formula itself? Maybe someone out there will be inspired to take on that challenge.
That would be really something to see. Imagine the elegance of that formula brought to life visually.
Right.
It could really open up new ways of understanding and exploring this problem. So for our listeners out there, we encourage you to check out the OEIS entry for A000159 and explore all the links that we'll have in the show notes. And if you found this deep dive intriguing, don't hesitate to go deeper into any of the concepts that grabbed your attention. The world of math is full of surprises. Until next time, happy exploring.
And happy calculating.